Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 4, Episode 22, To the Death. This episode aired May 13th, 1996. Such a dramatic title.
They're going for drama.
I was thinking back to the first super dramatic episode in Season 1, Duet, and it had such an innocent title. And now we're at To the Death.
Duet was a little misleading in the title, in the same way as The Visitor. They were very emotionally intense episodes, hiding behind a very innocent name.
Yeah, it should have been called You're Gonna Cry Your Eyes Out.
Yes.
Well, before we dig into To the Death, anything to say about last week's episode, For the Cause, about Cassidy and her terrorist ways?
Well, actually, I think Cassidy is a freedom fighter and innocent of all charges.
I feel like Sisko wouldn't have been so annoyed at Cassidy if it hadn't been for all the Snodgrass drama.
In summary, I think it was all Eddington's fault, and I don't think his motivations are quite as pure as Cal Hudson's. I think he was just one of those guys who blamed other people, like the Federation, for his own failings.
Yeah, he did seem to have arrived there. All right, on to this one. In the cold open, the Defiant is on its way back to the station after driving away Breen privateers, which I guess means pirates, from the Bajoran colony of Freehaven.
Well, this is slightly concerning here, because a privateer is a pirate under license by a government, usually to act against the enemies of that government, in the traditional age of sail meaning of the word. They're not simply a pirate. So if he's saying they're privateers, does that mean the Breen and the Bajorans are actually enemies? Maybe with the Federation, and the Breen are licensing pirates to go after their colonies and commerce?
Or is it just lazy writing, and they've commandeered that word as just a substitute for the word pirate? They should have just probably used the word pirate.
Yeah, I guess they didn't want to look it up and privateer sounded better.
Well, there was no Google in 1996, so it was very hard to find information. You had to actually have an encyclopedia, or a set of them.
Yeah, I remember those things.
Me too. We've also got the first mention of this Bajoran colony called Freehaven. I don't think we've heard that name before.
No, I don't think it has been mentioned previously.
And maybe never again, because it is Star Trek. Bashir, Dax, and Miles are hanging out in the mess hall, chatting about Molly disrupting Miles and Keiko's sleep. Julian makes some comment about her being jealous of the new baby coming, and when Miles asks how he knows anything about children, Julian says he was first in his class of pediatric medicine.
Of course.
And Miles and I both rolled our eyes at this.
Totally justified.
First season Julian stopped by for a visit.
I also think it's funny that Jadzia, who has admitted being a terrible parent, mother or father, is giving advice and Miles is listening to it.
Yeah, I'd stay away from her parental advice.
Maybe you listen to Jadzia for what not to do.
Worf comes in and orders an extra large prune juice, which comes in the tiniest glass, so that was hilarious. And then there's a little joke about Bashir sitting in Worf's favorite seat because he lives on the Defiant and he has a specific routine that he likes to follow. And Julian pretends like he's not going to move, but eventually he does. But it doesn't matter because Sisko calls the senior staff to the bridge immediately.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea when you have a giant Klingon towering over you, glaring at you. It's a good idea to give up the seat and, just not get beaten to death.
Yeah, just move. And people who really like routine, just move. Just let them have their chair. I mean, it's just so easy.
Yeah.
It looked like he was going to be annoying, but actually, no, he just moved. Well, now on the bridge, everyone stares at the view screen because something very bad has happened to the station. It looks like one of the station's upper pylons has been destroyed, and there is debris floating everywhere. That was a real shocker.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't believe we didn't jump to the theme from here, but we didn't. Instead, we go into the station where an injured Kira is ordering fire crews around when Quark comes in shouting for his brother. He frantically tells Kira that Ram was going to be working on one of the upper pylons today, but Kira says he's fine. She saw him earlier. And then Odo hands her a list of stolen equipment, so something's going on.
For sure.
When Sisko arrives and asks for a report, Kira says a Jem'Hadar strike team beamed aboard from a civilian transport, disabled comms and weapons, set off an explosive device in the upper pylon, raided the science lab, the reactor control facility, and several cargo bays. She says they were in and out and through the wormhole before we even knew what hit us. 18 dead, 31 missing, and over 100 people wounded. Quite an attack.
And this follows the pattern that if something bad happens, Kira is the one that gets hurt. as she's directing all the damage control efforts, and she's holding her arm, which has like a giant burn mark down it.
Yeah.
Nothing slows her down.
Oh, yeah, it takes a lot to get Kira to go down. Sisko reads off some of the things that were stolen, like microfusion initiators, photonic amplifiers, EPS power stabilizers. The attack happened about 45 minutes ago, so Dax says they could still follow the ion trail of the ship. So Sisko calls the Defiant and says, prepare for departure. But nobody responds, so I don't know if anybody heard him. Bashir is going to stay to tend to the wounded. Kira is remaining in charge of the station, and Sisko tells her to contact Starfleet and get some ships out here, just in case this was a diversion.
Perhaps you should have more than one ship stationed at the edge of a wormhole, which leads to the greatest threat the Federation has faced since the Borg. Just saying.
So Sisko, Odo, and Dax beam to the Defiant, and off we go through the wormhole. And we cue the theme song.
We're seeing lots of the Defiant, so good episode already.
Yep. And again, he calls the Defiant and says 3 to beam over. Nobody answers, but they beam over. Do you think he checked on Jake? Is Jake okay? Did we check on Keiko and Molly? I guess they wouldn't be in the upper pylon.
They'd probably all be in the habitat ring, but I think it's always good to check on your families after a Jem'Hadar attack.
Well, yeah, because they raided like a cargo bay and different locations and...
Yeah, and the science lab.
Well, I guess we assume everybody's okay.
Well, Sisko is a man of action. He does seem to want to get straight into the fight.
Oh yeah, he's like, I'm going after these guys. As we follow the fading trail of the raider's ship, Odo says he's surprised something like this hadn't happened sooner. This is his, see, let me lock the station down moment.
Right.
And Sisko says something about wishing the Defiant could stand guard 26 hours a day, and then Worf kind of mumbles about how adopting a siege mentality is ultimately self-defeating. And Miles is like, you might think something different if you had family on the station.
Okay, I'm going to have to question Worf on his tactical skills here. He has just blown off the whole concept of a combat air patrol, which is basically keeping a flying guard around an area you want to protect. So any incoming threats, you have planes in the air, or spaceships in this case, ready to intercept whatever that threat is. I can only assume Worf skipped that lecture at the Academy. Or the Klingon mindset is completely reactionary.
Maybe. I mean, even though Starfleet is supposedly not the military, they must teach military tactics and strategy.
Yeah, even then, I think you'd want to teach Starfleet officers about military tactics, just if for anything, for defensive purposes, against people who could use those against you. And in this situation where you have a known hostile enemy on the other side of the wormhole, I think active defense would be a valuable strategy.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want that to be the only thing, I guess, that you're doing.
Yeah.
But it would make sense to have some kind of air cover on that station with all the stuff that's going on.
Exactly. And one final point here. They engage the cloak. I thought the Jem'Hadar could actually find ships that were under cloak.
Well, it seemed like the Jem'Hadar could find them if they were looking for them or if they happened to be scanning in the area that they were. So I can't imagine that it's completely useless. Or, why would we ever use it? But we're in the very dangerous Gamma Quadrant, so even if somebody in the Jem'Hadar can see you, maybe somebody else who's terrible can't see you. So I think you still use it.
That's a good point. One of the other thousands of awful races in the Gamma Quadrant could attack you. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a dangerous place. Well, then we run into a damaged Jem'Hadar warship transmitting a distress signal. The ship is about to explode, and there are 7 life signs on board. Odo says, might be a trap.
I'd be tempted to listen to Odo.
But Sisko takes Odo and Worf plus a security detail to the transporter bay where 6 armed security personnel point phasers at the transporter pad, and we beam over 6 Jem'Hadar soldiers who are holding their hands like they had weapons before beaming, but now they don't have them anymore because we left them behind on purpose. The Jem'Hadar leader says, even without weapons, we are more than a match for you.
This makes me wonder if the Jem'Hadar have a word for overconfidence.
Yeah.
I think they're a little outclassed here, seeing as they're unarmed and there are 6 Starfleet officers pointing guns at them. And then Sisko and Worf both point phasers at them too. Yeah, they're not going anywhere.
They have to be, I think, to be what they are and to fill the role that they're filling. They have to be overly confident. They're more about volume than they are about intelligence.
Yeah, the cannon fodder approach to winning battles. Throw enough disposable bodies at the problem and you'll probably win. That sounds about right for the founders.
So they hurl some more insults about Worf and the traitor, meaning Odo.
Traitor, ouch.
Before Vorta emerges from the back of the group. He says, "These people saved our lives." And the Jem'Hadar leader says, "And for that, we shall take advantage of their mistake."
These guys sound more Ferengi than anything.
That was terrible. The Vorta says, "You'll do nothing without my permission." He apologizes to Sisko and says the Jem'Hadar are lacking in social graces. That's certainly true.
I would worry about the influence that Odo could have over these Jem'Hadar, seeing as they openly called him the traitor.
Well, that's a good point, but they still think he's a god. So even if they think the gods are being traitors to each other, they still think they're gods.
That's true.
The same strike team that attacked the station seems to have attacked this Jem'Hadar ship. The Jem'Hadar tells the Vorta to reveal nothing to Sisko, but the Vorta tells him to shut up and says he and Sisko need to talk in private. When one of the Jem'Hadar hands over the container of the white, it looks like a picnic basket when the Vorta guy takes it. I had to back up and look at it again. It looked very silly.
And one of the Vorta says, "I thought we were going on a picnic."
I know, it was funny. Well, anyway, this Vorta is Jeffery Combs, who we have already seen 3 other times as different characters from this one.
Yeah.
Although this is the one that I recognize him from, not because I've ever seen him in this character in one of the episodes, but I've seen images.
He really embraces this role. He just nails what the Vorta are.
Yeah, definitely in this episode. Well, now the Vorta is buttering up Sisko, saying his psychographic profile is required reading for Vorta field supervisors. He claims to know things about Sisko that he probably doesn't know about himself, which this does not help your cause to overplay your hand like that.
I think this just plays into their general overconfidence.
Yeah.
They think they are a superior race to all of the people there.
Yes.
So maybe that leads to them just giving too much away.
Yeah. Well, then he says, "What if I offered to make you absolute ruler of the Federation? No president or a Starfleet chief of staff, just you." And Sisko says maybe their psychographic profile of him isn't that great, which makes the Vorta laugh.
Overconfidence.
He claims he's just doing his job of trying to build a bridge between the Dominion and a potential ally.
Right.
And wouldn't it be simpler if the Dominion and the Federation could reach some mutual beneficial understanding without the unpleasantness of a military conflict? This guy.
He is very slick.
He's like a used car salesman, for sure. Sisko wants to know how to find the Jem'Hadar who attacked the station, and the Vorta says he can lead Sisko to them, but he needs help eliminating them. They're renegades who turn their backs on their oath of allegiance to the Dominion. And we get a little exposition now about Iconia, when the Vorta asks Sisko what he knows about them. It was a vast interstellar empire from 200,000 years ago that used sophisticated transporters, also known as gateways, that allowed them to move instantaneously from one planet to another, or one system to another, without the use of starships.
Ooh, Stargates.
A Dominion scientist discovered an Iconian gateway on one of the outlying worlds, and when trying to restore it, these Jem'Hadar renegades rebelled and are now trying to complete the gateway themselves. The equipment they stole from the station was probably taken to help them complete the gateway. If they can make it operational, they'll become virtually invincible, taking over the Dominion and ultimately the Federation. At least that's what he says.
I'd be suspicious.
Sisko suggests the Founders should just order them to stand down, but for the first time, we hear that the Founders' ability to control the Jem'Hadar has been a bit overstated.
Huge reveal.
Otherwise, we would never have had to addict them to the white.
Oh, I love how Sisko picks on Weyoun, saying, "It looks like the Dominion isn't as stable as it likes to appear."
Yeah, but he gets defensive right away, pointing out that the Dominion has endured for 2,000 years and will continue to endure.
Someone seems a little defensive.
But the gateway must be destroyed. Sisko agrees, but he gets really close to the Vorta and says it quietly to maybe show him a little dominance, but I don't think he gets afraid of anything.
Yeah, I don't think the Vorta are engineered to be terribly easy to intimidate. Although I do like the true believer side of Weyoun coming out.
Yeah.
The Dominion will endure when the Federation has turned to dust.
Yeah, of course.
And we do find there are flaws in the perfect Founders system, that the Jem'Hadar aren't as loyal as they claim to be. So the Founders are fallible.
Yeah. Well, Sisko now is telling the team about the plan, and Worf talks about the next-gen episode Contagion from Season 2, where they found the Iconian homeworld and were forced to destroy the gateway to stop the Romulans from having access to it. That's a pretty good episode. I watched it a couple of nights ago after I watched this episode for the first time.
I remember you showing it to me.
Odo wonders how the Jem'Hadar will be kept under control, as they must know controlling the gateway means freedom for their people. I'm not really clear how the gateway means freedom for the Jem'Hadar. I mean, they're still addicted to the white. Maybe they could get what they needed more easily?
I assumed they could use the gateway to seize control of the production of the white, and then the founders would have no control.
Seems overstated.
I'd also speculate that maybe this isn't completely true. This is just a potential risk to the founders.
Yeah, okay.
Like, what the founders have done is looked at the absolute worst case scenario, and this is it. Even if it's the 0.01% chance, this is what they're worried about.
Yeah, he does say something about they were running projections or different scenarios. So I guess, maybe that came up a couple of times in their tests.
And then maybe even the conservative estimate would be the Dominion would end up in a civil war and they would lose control of parts of it.
Yeah.
So they're kind of desperate to not let this happen.
Yeah, I would imagine if all of the Jem'Hadar rebelled, they'd be in very big trouble.
Oh, completely.
Though I don't see how that's a possibility when they're looking at the founders as their gods.
Right.
That religion thing gets in the way, and they're not all going to turn their backs on the religion all at once.
Yeah. These guys that they're sending still seem pretty loyal and revere them as gods.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we learn now the Vorta's name is Weyoun. And Sisko says that Weyoun claims the Jem'Hadar don't know anything about the gateway. They think this is a routine search and destroy mission. Worf doesn't think it's honorable to lie to the Jem'Hadar, but everyone else is like, it seems fine to us. When Sisko says there will be a joint briefing later, Miles jokingly says, it'll be followed by a get-to-know-you buffet.
Yeah, both Miles and Dax make jokes about working with the Jem'Hadar. It seems to fit the sort of gallows humor I would expect for those very experienced characters.
Well, and we have had awkward buffets on Star Trek before. Mostly, I think it's been with Klingons. So it would be even worse with the Jem'Hadar, especially when we find out later that they don't eat. So that would be strange.
Yeah. Maybe that's the secret of the Jem'Hadar. They actually drink heavily. They just keep it very quiet.
I don't think so. They implied in this episode that all they had was fighting and the white. So that one Jem'Hadar soldier who didn't need the white, does that mean he doesn't eat either?
Ooh, now that raises some interesting questions.
Something has to be used to sustain them, so maybe he does have to eat.
If only they'd gone back and investigated that guy.
Yeah. Sisko requests a meeting with the lead Jem'Hadar. This guy says Sisko is lucky that the only thing he despises more than the Federation is a Jem'Hadar soldier who breaks his vow of allegiance. Sisko wants to make it clear that he gives the orders, not him or Weyoun. He will hold this guy personally responsible for the actions of his men. The very ominous dude agrees, saying he is the first, but Sisko says, I'm the first for this mission. And the guy's like, for now. I mean, he's scary.
Oh, yeah. He's kind of quietly malevolent.
Yeah. And now we're having our joint briefing of the target, and they tell the soldiers they have to destroy a particular chamber of weapons and supplies, and they'll have to fight their way in as they can't beam directly in, of course.
Yeah.
There are around 150 soldiers in the garrison, so Miles suggests taking out the base from orbit with some quantum torpedoes.
Smart.
But the central structure is made from solid neutronium, and even a direct hit won't destroy it, of course.
I say we dust off and nuke it from orbit.
I mean, how many times on Star Trek have we seen where cities are leveled, but no, not this one. Can't do it. You got to go hand to hand.
Look on the bright side. At least they can beam down. They don't have to take a shuttle to the surface.
That's true. One of the soldiers makes a crack about punishing the disloyal, which Odo takes personally, but another says something about it not being their place to accuse a god of betraying heaven.
Oh, I love that.
The gods themselves will sit in judgment over you.
This is just underlining how different Odo is from his people. He seems really irritated how they have this godlike reverence for them.
Yes.
And how he says, the quicker you figure out they're not gods, the better it will be for you.
Yeah.
Love that.
I think we've talked about it many times. Odo says he's no god, and neither are the founders.
Very solid advice from Odo.
They should listen to him.
Yeah. And he's a god, so shouldn't they listen to him telling them that he's not a god?
That he's not a god, yeah. It's very confusing, especially when your brain is so small. Sisko sighs and continues the briefing. This is a tough crowd. The first objective will be to neutralize the outer guards and secure the main entrance. When Worf says it will be difficult, the Jem'Hadar starts mocking Klingons. Worf, of course, takes the bait, and Sisko tells him to knock it off. But the soldier played by the scary X-Files guy, Brian Thompson, who has been on before as a different alien.
Brian Thompson is just scary looking.
Without the makeup. Yeah, absolutely.
On the X-Files, where he played the alien assassin, he was just Brian Thompson looking scary. Great screen presence.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that will always haunt me. Well, he steps forward and says, one day the Klingon Empire will fall before the Jem'Hadar. And he just keeps insulting Worf, calling him impotent and weak. So, of course, they grab at each other. But Sisko and the lead Jem'Hadar pulls them apart. And Sisko has this, oh my God, this is going to suck look on his face.
Yeah, he has this look of, this is going great.
Yeah, we've seen it before. Now we go into a simulation, which we don't know is a simulation at first. And of course, the team fails because they aren't willing to keep someone in the room until the bomb goes off. Can't Odo just sweep the room, by just swinging himself all over the place to see if there's somebody hiding?
Yeah.
They don't use Odo properly.
No. You see something here, which is the fundamental problem when you're working with the Jem'Hadar. They have no problem dying for their gods if that's what the mission calls for.
Yeah. The lead Jem'Hadar guy says they won't succeed as long as they value their lives over victory.
Yeah.
And Weyoun thinks there's something to be said for soldiers who aren't afraid to die, but Sisko does not agree.
He does not.
And he tells him to keep practicing. I wonder why the Defiant has a holodeck, but no medical facilities. This is a very weird ship.
Entertainment must be more important than medical facilities.
I guess you could use the holodeck to create medical facilities.
That's a good point. You could make additional facilities out of the holodeck. Yeah, Good idea.
I'm going to remember that because there's going to be something in the future where they say they can't do something on the Defiant. I'm going to be like, how about the holodeck? We did that.
Or the writers will forget about the holodeck and we'll just pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Sisko chats with the Jem'Hadar leader. Now we learn his name. Or actually, he said his name earlier, but it didn't stick with me. But it's Ometaclon.
Ometaclon.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's one of the Transformers.
It sounds like a Transformer name. And Sisko is telling him and Weyoun, saying that these drills are supposed to make them a better team, but the constant contempt shown by Ometaclon isn't helping. And then when Ometaclon asks if he should lie, Sisko says he'd like him to at least maintain the pretense that they're on the same side. So yes, please lie and help me out. Ometaclon says the only way for the troops to respect each other is to fight alongside them as mixed teams, but Weyoun says it's not practical. Weyoun postures, but Ometaclon calls him a fool and says they already know about the gateway. Whoops. He says, you think you have to lie to us and control us with the whites, but we are more loyal to the founders than the Vorta.
Ooh.
This is the problem when everybody is forced to do something, or when it's only about this, crazy belief system, and then you've got all these guys addicted to drugs. The problem is the loyalty's not real, and they're not loyal to each other, because that's just not what it's about.
And what's crazy is the two of them seem to be trying to outdo their loyalty.
Yes, exactly.
I'm more loyal. No, I'm more loyal.
Yeah.
It's like, who's more devout?
I will kill you to show that I'm more loyal. Great.
Right, exactly. Now, another thing here is these Jem'Hadar seem to be completely still dedicated to the founders and see them as gods. And they know about the gateway.
Yeah.
So why is the gateway so important?
That's a great question. Well, this is what I'm saying. They wouldn't all turn all of a sudden, but I guess enough of them could cause a problem. Weyoun does point out here that there's a whole group of them not behaving in the way that Ometaclon is behaving. And Ometaclon says, well, and for that, they'll die. And Sisko says, well, now we have mixed teams, but this is not a suicide mission. Everyone who goes in comes back out.
There certainly seems to be the impression here that there is a lot of conflict between the Vorta and the Jem'Hadar.
Yeah.
They seem to hold each other in contempt, basically.
Because there's no respect for each other.
Yeah.
The Vorta thinks the Jem'Hadar is basically a hired dog. And the Jem'Hadar just think that these guys are just like dogs for hire in a different way. So they each look at each other as lesser,
right.
Yet one is supposed to listen to the other. They seem to have a similar loyalty to the founders, but I don't know if it's the same yet. But yeah, they are not working well together. And I can't imagine they ever would with these attitudes. If the Vorta treated the Jem'Hadar better, maybe they would. But at the same time, why bother? They don't care about anything. They just go in to die. They only live to be a couple years old. They don't think of them as I was going to say humans, but, they don't think of them as people in any way.
They don't see them as a valuable life form.
No, they don't. And the feeling is mutual. The only thing they care about are the founders, and the founders are lying to them.
About everything.
Everything. Oh, this is a mess. Now one of the Jem'Hadar is staring at Dax, trying to understand her behavior. And we learn in the scene that the Jem'Hadar do not sleep, do not eat, or do anything fun. There are no Jem'Hadar females, and they can fight within 3 days of emerging from their birthing chambers. This makes Dax understand why they're so cranky.
So are they genderless? Or is that like too radical a concept for the 1990s?
I think that's too radical of a concept because Weyoun does tell the leader to control his men. So he does refer to them as men. But also that might be the universal translator.
Yeah.
That's the word that it picked. But they appear to be genderless, yes. We also learn here that the Jem'Hadar don't live that long. Not many even get to 15. And Dax tells the soldier that she stopped counting her age at around 300 years, which shocks him. And he says something like, "Oh, you don't look it." That was cute.
The Jem'Hadar also tells her that any who reach the age 20 are considered honored elders.
Yeah, 20 is amazing. Now in the mess hall, Odo is talking about envying the Jem'Hadar's ability to go without sleep. And Worf says, there's no point to battle if you can't enjoy the fruits of victory.
You gotta love Klingons.
And he says, Klingon women are partners in battle and the mothers of our children. And Dax says, and a lot of fun at parties too. And there's like a beat and Worf says, true. That was quite cute.
Oh, Dax.
Although also here, Miles makes some weird smirk, which didn't make any sense. But up until then, that was very cute.
I feel this speaks to a comment you made a few episodes ago about, are there really any Klingon civilians?
No. As far as we can tell, there's children and then there's soldiers.
Well, they're just small soldiers.
But, maybe it's not exactly an organized military. It's just, this is just what it is.
All Klingons just fight.
Yeah, you get a ship, you serve on a ship. This is just what everybody does.
And what's the point of battle if you can't sing songs about it?
Yeah. Well, there is no point to it. If you don't get anything out of it, what are you doing? But the founders have convinced them that this is what they need to do.
Serving their gods is all they need.
It's awful. Weyoun is creepily staring at Odo. Miles jokingly says, go order him to stand on his head, and then they all laugh. And again, we show a real insensitivity to Odo's feelings.
Yeah, I think it was Dax said, you're a founder. No, he's not. He's completely separate from the founders. That was incredibly insensitive and really jerky.
Yes.
It would be like Odo saying to Miles, oh, well, you're a human. They're all mass murdering Nazis, right?
They're all the same, yeah. They continue to treat Odo badly.
Yeah.
How is he loyal to them? They're not nice enough. Only because he loves Kira and now Lwaxana.
Yeah, and I don't think Kira would say that to him or call him that. She has an understanding of the difference. And I guess I don't get why his colleagues are being so insensitive to that.
Yeah, no, she wouldn't say that exact thing, but she'd be 20 minutes late to a meeting with him and tell him about her boyfriend. I mean...
Well, that episode wasn't even proper, Kira. And you stopped me from ranting about it last time I brought it up, so I'm calling time out on this.
Well, it happened.
It's been purged from working storage.
The soldiers now come in with their picnic basket of white and disrupt Weyoun's meal. He unlocks the picnic basket and asks Ometaklan if he can vouch for the loyalty of his men. When he says they pledge their loyalty to the founders until death, Weyoun says, then receive this reward from the founders. It's the way he says it that cracked me up.
Yeah, that sort of tired, half-hearted way that he did it. He shows his contempt for them.
Yes, and he's like, may it keep you strong. And then he hands the vials to Ometaklan, and he takes one and passes it on. It reminded me so much of communion in church. I guess that's what it's supposed to remind me of.
Yeah, I think that seemed very familiar. Definitely a parallel there.
The crew watches this, and Worf says quietly, loyalty at such a price isn't really loyalty. True.
Yeah.
And then the soldiers want to resume battle drills, but the crew is still eating. This, of course, turns into a brawl, which gets broken up. Ometaklan comes in and just kills the Jem'Hadar who was involved in the brawl. And Sisko confines Worf to quarters until the mission is over. Ometaklan is not impressed with the lack of discipline. Sisko says dead men can't learn from their mistakes. They argue a bit, and Ometaklan calls him weak again and says Sisko should die in his soldier's place. And when the mission is over, I will see that you do. That guy's nasty.
He's just not a people person. I think this whole scene sums up quite nicely that if you have disposable soldiers, you end up treating them like disposable soldiers.
Yeah, totally. And Sisko makes a valid point. People need to learn. That's how you get great soldiers, because they learn. If they just die when they make one mistake, I mean, come on.
I have the feeling that the Jem'Hadar usually work on the principle of if you throw enough bodies into the battle, they'll run out of ammo first.
Oh, that's totally how they're working. You stepped out of line, and now you're dead. And now I go back to my person who's 2 years old. Now in a different part of the ship, Weyoun asks to speak to Odo. He admits he finds it disturbing to see him being ordered around by the Federation. Odo asks if Weyoun will leave him alone if he orders him to, and he says he will. But then he says Odo's people want him to come home no matter what their differences are. He says, they still love you. Maybe they do, but I don't love them, Odo says. And Weyoun says, you're not a great liar.
Because emotional blackmail works so well on Odo.
Oh yeah, well, on anybody. Weyoun is like, you're not a great liar. You may as well admit the truth. He says he can make it possible for Odo to go home if he's ready. But Odo says he's not ready, but he is ready to end this conversation. I live to serve you, Weyoun says, and leaves him alone. That guy is creepy.
Yeah, he's almost as big a suck-up as Eddington until he turned to the dark side.
Miles gives Dax a goodbye message for Keiko. It's the 11th he's recorded since they got married. We learn everyone does this, including Dax. There's no mention, by the way, of the horrible thing that happened to Miles a couple of episodes ago. We just, pretend like it never happened.
Dax does bring up her 8 lifetimes.
She does. She hasn't said that in a while.
This scene also continues the thread of Miles and Keiko really need to learn how to communicate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Worf comes to talk to Sisko. He says it's come to his attention that Ometaclon has threatened to kill him, so he recommends he stay on the ship, but of course Sisko isn't going to do that. So then Worf says he wants him to know that if Ometaclon does carry out his threat, he will not live to boast about it. That's very reassuring, Sisko says.
You gotta just love Worf and his code.
Yep.
Just perfect.
Yep.
And beautifully delivered by Michael Dorn.
It's really the thing that Michael Dorn is best at in that role, is delivering those exact kind of statements. It's the quiet, menacing mode in which he says it, but it's also very calm.
Oh yeah, that's an ice-cold promise.
Yes. We have finally arrived at our destination. Miles passes out weapons, even to the Jem'Hadar, and they immediately set their phasers to maximum.
You also see more of that weird sort of Weyoun politicking, where he says, this is a momentous occasion, the first joint mission between the Federation and the Dominion.
Nobody cares.
Is it politics? Is it trying to make something out of nothing? Is it trying to talk up the Dominion?
The Vorta have told themselves a story, or whoever trains the Vorta have told them a story that this is their role.
Yeah.
When they say those things, you don't always think that they believe it. Like when he was handing out the white and he did that little speech. He had no conviction in his voice in saying it. And it's kind of the same thing here. It's like, this is just my job. I have to say this thing.
Yeah, right.
But nobody's buying into it, but it's part of the job.
Yeah, he's sort of going through the motions because that's what he's trained to do, and that's what you do at this point.
Just saying stuff you don't believe because it's the words on the paper.
Right. In 1984, George Orwell called it duck speak.
Before transporting down, Ometaclon makes a speech about how, as of this moment, they are all dead. We go into battle to reclaim our lives. This we do gladly. Victory is life. Then after they march off, Miles says he's very much alive and he intends to stay that way. Amen, Sisko says.
And you get another piece of that Weyoun-isms, as I'm going to call them, where after he gives that little speech, Weyoun says, such charming people, mocking them yet again.
Yes.
Also, a Metaclon speech makes me think maybe the Jem'Hadar were more like the Klingons at some point. They had a battle culture and rituals, and the founders have kind of corrupted these to use for their own ends. But those little pieces of their original culture still remain.
Maybe. It sounded like a prayer to me. Like, again, a thing that you just repeat. And the founders have convinced them that the only thing for them to live for is fighting in the name of the founders. That's what they've become sure of. And that's what that prayer said. Well, now we're dead. If we win, then we live. It's It's like, ugh.
That is a really interesting take.
This to me is a weird religion.
Yeah, I think you're right. For the Jem'Hadar, this is a religious obligation.
Down to the planet we go, and the Jem'Hadar think they've been betrayed because their phasers don't work. But turns out the Iconian gateway is generating some kind of dampening field, and nobody's phasers work. Then the bad Jem'Hadar appear, and the hand-to-hand combat begins. Fortunately, the bad ones are wearing slightly different tops, so you can tell who is who. 2 Starfleet NPCs are lost quickly.
And most importantly, Worf gets his first kill of the episode.
Okay. But it also seems so silly that they killed their biggest dude because he got into a fight with Worf. I mean, I think they could have used him on this mission.
Yeah, the fact that they're supposed to be fighting against 150 Jem'Hadar on the planet, you'd think they'd want to try and keep their numbers up a little.
Well, we're not fighting 150. There's only 20-something supposedly around this installation, but there were 150 on the planet or in the surrounding town.
That's true. A Metaclon did say they would be scattered throughout the city, which seems strategically like a very bad idea.
Well, they all grab hand weapons and continue to charge into the facility. Once inside, Worf drops the bag he's carrying and it morphs into Odo, who instantly takes out a bunch of guards, which, this is what I'm saying, they should use him like that all the time.
Oh, agreed. We also see that Odo can do a remarkable number of different types of bag.
Yes, this is a different kind of bag.
I mean, he's done a holdall, he's done a backpack, now he's doing a tube bag. Do you think he practices this when he's back on the station?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure I follow what the plan is here. Was the bag a diversion so they didn't know which one was a bomb? But why would they even know there was a bomb coming in? I didn't get that bag thing at all.
Yeah, it wasn't really explained. Your idea seems to make sense, a diversion of who had the bomb.
That made no sense to me.
And by the time Worf drops the Odo bag, I counted 7 kills for Worf.
Oh, wow. I was not counting.
Oh, I was keeping count, and I have the timestamps of when each one happened too.
Okay.
In case you need it.
Meanwhile, Metaclon, Sisko, and Miles make their way to the gateway, and they take out the guards. Miles starts to set up the bomb while Sisko jumps in front of an attack, saving Metaclon, who is shocked that Sisko would be willing to do that. The bomb is armed, so everyone heads out. This was like a very fast scene.
It really was.
The bomb goes off, and the weapons begin to work again.
I did like how Metaclon was really surprised that Sisko jumped in front of the other Jem'Hadar to save him, and asks why. And Sisko's reply is great with, "If you have to ask, you'll never understand."
Yeah, totally. And they will never understand.
Yeah, it's not programmed into them. You're just disposable.
Weyoun beams down with the white and congratulates everyone. He says he'd like to inspect the wreckage, but Metaclon just shoots and kills him.
Game over.
He says that was for questioning our loyalty.
A little harsh.
And everyone looks super tense, but then he says there's been enough killing for one day. And one of the guys picks up the picnic basket, although how are they going to open that without the Vortic guy? Because it had some kind of biometric lock. Maybe they just shoot it. I don't know. Anyway, Metaclon says they will remain on the planet and hunt down the other disloyal Jem'Hadar. And he tells Sisko, you fought well, but the next time we meet, we will be enemies. And off they go. The end.
And a very abrupt ending.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a super long story to get there and then boom, over. Okay, do you have overanalysis?
Oh, lots of things.
Oh, okay.
Here's the big one. What caused the Jem'Hadar at the gateway to rebel versus the Jem'Hadar who were sent after them who seem 100% loyal, no hint of insurrection?
Leadership. I guess that would be my answer in many cases, because the trouble is I don't think there would be any real loyalty because they die off so quickly. They don't understand, like the whole thing with Sisko jumping in front of Metaclon to save him. They don't understand that. They're never going to get that. They're going to follow their leader, and they're not. It's that whole thing that Sisko said about dead men don't learn. So you've got 2-year-olds. All they do is fight. All they know is to follow the leader. So if one leader gets an idea in his head, like one who lasts more than 2 years, gets some idea, then they're just going to follow him.
Right.
Because they don't have anything else. They can't think for themselves. I just think it's that sort of cult-like mentality.
I was wondering whether it was something related to the radiation or the field that was being generated by the gateway that was somehow modifying them or changing them.
That's interesting.
But I really like your idea about leadership, of like if the first got this idea of I can break away from the Dominion and become an independent race, that the others would all fall in line because he's the first. He's the leader.
Like, he could easily, the leader of that group could easily just kill off any of the ones that didn't want to do what he wanted to do until he ended up with guys who were loyal. That's part of the problem of it.
You know, if they are treating this like a religion and they see the founders as gods, this guy could manipulate things and tell the others that the founders spoke to him and this is what they want.
That's true, especially if their Vorta is dead, which I'm sure they killed him.
Oh, the founders willed it.
Yeah. Although I like this thought that it might be physiological. That's always an interesting idea. It's like they're reacting to the lead in the gasoline or something.
Yeah, maybe because they're genetically engineered, the engineering makes them susceptible to this field.
They only know two things, fight and follow the first.
Right.
I would think you'd have a lot of problems like this. Okay.
Next thing. So despite the fact they're fiercely loyal to the gods, the founders, they still called Odo a traitor.
They did. Well, one of them did.
So you think that was one individual, not a shared view?
Well, he was the hothead. He was the one that they killed. So maybe he was the one outlier.
Good take.
But would the other so-called gods call one of the gods a traitor?
Right.
Because no, they wouldn't. Because they want the soldiers and the Vorta to look up to all of the changelings.
Right, because that could lead to the question, if one founder is flawed, how many others are flawed? And you don't want doubts in the minds of your cult members.
That's exactly right. So maybe they're just trying to show us there that the Jem'Hadar, they do have independent thought, but they're never around long enough to turn it into anything.
Yeah, the ones who start thinking too much get assigned the most dangerous missions. On to the next thing. So, on the planet, there were 150 rebel Jem'Hadar. So they took out the 27 in the tower, plus the 9 around it. That still leaves 114 on the planet they need to deal with. And a Metaclon only has 6 guys in his team. The numbers just don't look good.
Yeah. Well, if they've taken out the leader, they might have better luck, and they'll probably take out big groups of them from here.
Yeah, if they lose their leader, they may just be less effective.
But yeah, I agree. The numbers don't make a lot of sense, but they don't care.
That's true.
Yeah.
A Metaclon will just keep on fighting until all his guys are dead or they've won.
Exactly.
Next. So, how are these rebels getting their white?
Oh, I wondered the same thing. They may have stolen it as well, but they can't live that long without it. So why don't you just wait it out? And I guess that's the point. If they could use that gateway to get the white, now they become dangerous.
Yeah.
But if they don't have any way to get the white, then they're going to be goners in a few days.
Right. And even the loyal Jem'Hadar have a limit because those boxes don't have an unlimited supply, as we saw in Hippocratic Oath.
Yes.
Plus, it required a Vorta handprint to open.
They're a little hand-wavy with this topic, I have to say, because they could really use this. If they were very strict about how it worked, and they were strict within the stories, they could use that to advance or to stop the story. But they're too loosey-goosey with it.
And we continue.
Okay.
So they can't use quantum torpedoes to destroy the structure because of the material it's made from.
Uh-huh.
But why don't they use the torpedoes to clear away all the ground targets around the objective before they beam down?
I know! I thought that was hilarious. I imagine they were trying to say, we need the element of surprise, but yeah.
Reducing the number of Jem'Hadar that are on the planet before you get down there seems like a really good idea.
Agreed.
To me, this is another one of those Deep Space Nine plans where I have to ask, has anybody studied any military tactics?
No, we're just going to beam in. And also, they don't even send anyone in advance to see that the weapons don't work. They just beam in. Oh, the weapons don't work. Well, let's pick up some sticks and start hitting each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very bad Deep Space Nine plan.
The next thing is Odo. I assume Weyoun and all the other field agents have been briefed about exactly who he is.
Yep.
So should they run into him when they're out in the field, they can deliver this message that he can come back.
Right.
And like the founders, engage in a little bit of emotional blackmail, saying that they really love him and want him to come home.
Yeah, they must be painting the picture as almost like a sheep that has just gotten away from the flock. And once he comes back into the flock, everything will be fine. They're not supposed to hurt him or kill him, certainly. Just tell him that we love him and we want him back, even though at this point we know they don't love him because he harmed one of the other shapeshifters.
Wasn't his fault, but yeah.
Well, they're convinced, though, that if he gets into the Great Link, that he will be assimilated.
Yeah.
And maybe he will. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Well, he totally rejects their values, so they'd probably seeing it as they would fix him.
Totally.
So, following on from the last point, do you think Weyoun could actually spot lies from a changeling?
No.
Yeah, totally agree. You would absolutely want your genetically engineered servants to have a complete blind spot there. You do not want them to know when you are lying to them.
Absolutely not, because they're lying to them all the time.
Yeah.
I am quite sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the Vorta's in on it. They're in on the lie, but then why would they be loyal? So, no, I think they're lied to them.
Yeah, I think Weyoun was just lying. He's trying to further his agenda and complete some task he's been given. He's going to use any method he can.
Yeah, he might believe that he can see it, but...
That's a good one.
I don't believe that he can.
Yeah, just more lies.
Just more lies. Yep.
And my final point.
Oh.
After, 40 minutes of me doing overanalysis.
No, only like 10.
Dampening fields.
Yeah.
Seeing as the phasers didn't work, do you think they considered replicating old-style chemical-powered weapons, like firearms?
Or projectiles.
Now, I'm pretty sure that shooting people with projectile weapons is a lot more efficient than hitting them with pointy sticks or sharp-edged weapons, even if those weapons are very sharp.
Bow and arrow.
Or crossbow. Almost any kind of ranged weapon would be effective.
Trebuchet. Is that what that's called? Is that what the big catapults were called?
Yes. They would look impressive, too.
Throw a rock. Slingshot.
I just find it funny that they have all this technology and they don't immediately call up to the Defiant and say,
yes,
look in the historical files, replicate a load of submachine guns and beam them down.
Yeah. Yes, and if the photon torpedoes can't destroy the structure, then you could use them to destroy the ground below the structure, and it would collapse. And maybe that wouldn't destroy the gateway, and you'd still have to blow it up somehow. Although,
yeah,
I'm not sure it makes sense that once they got there with a bomb, they were able to blow it up. But anyway, I digress. At the very least, you could take out the soldiers and you would make it easier to get in that way. Or they could have tried the weapons and then said, oh, the dampening field, or there's a shield or something, but they didn't. And so it leaves you with all these other ideas of things they could have done.
Yeah. Beam down a couple of Jem'Hadar first because they can use their cloaks and hide.
Right.
See if the weapons work, get them to do a bit of scouting.
Reconnaissance. It's called reconnaissance.
Did nobody study military tactics at Starfleet?
Yeah.
I can only assume all the books were thrown out of an airlock at some point.
This was a classic Deep Space Nine plan. Terrible. And they're lucky when it works.
Straight power play.
It was a straight power play.
Indeed it was.
Oh my God. Gosh, we haven't had one of those in a long time. Oh my gosh. That's funny.
They really need to bring Kira along on these kind of missions. She at least would have a clue about military doctrine and tactics. And that wraps up my overanalysis for this episode.
The only thing I wrote in my overanalysis is that the Jem'Hadar might be the scariest of all of the baddies. I mean, they're way scarier than the Romulans or the Klingons from the early days.
Definitely.
I mean, they're born to kill, and that's it. The Borg were certainly the most terrifying thing to come out of Next Gen.
Yeah.
But the individual drones were not scary at all because they didn't have free will. These guys don't have free will, but they think they do. And that is way scarier. And they're part of this freaky cult, which we've talked about before. And so there's no logic in it. So you can't talk them out of stuff, which is the way Star Trek deals with many things is they will talk a machine out of something.
Right.
They will talk the different aliens out of something. You can't talk the Jem'Hadar, these devotees to this cult, out of anything. So I find them just super scary. And of course, yes, they have this advanced technology and they can cloak themselves and even their ships. They don't seem to be able to identify the cloaks of the ships. They seem to be able to get through the wormhole without anybody knowing about it. We haven't even talked about that.
Good point.
So these guys are scary. That's my overanalysis, which is why on Prodigy, when they ended up in the Gamma Quadrant, I was like, you got to get out of there. This is bad.
Yeah, there are too many bad things there.
Yes.
I really like your idea there that the Jem'Hadar are engineered that they believe they have a choice, but they really don't.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That would make the founders even worse. That these guys think they have a choice to believe in these gods, but they don't. They're just programmed to think they have that. The founders are awful.
That's the trouble with the cult. All right, well, let's go to women in the future. I don't have a lot to say about women in the future. There's not much in this episode. Dax had a couple of weird interactions, but I suppose it's mostly on brand for her.
Yeah.
She is the one who has the weird conversations.
She got to do a lot of Klingon fighting.
That's true. I think this assumption that the Jem'Hadar need women to relax was, stupid. Just seemed very focused on everyone can only love in one way, which is such a 90s way of looking at things. So I found that weak.
Yeah.
But beyond that, Kira was her tough self, but she was in one scene and we never saw her again. So, not really much to say about women in the future here.
She was only down one arm. That barely affects her.
Yeah, I still have both hips are working right now. I'm good.
Yeah. I think Kira as a character is really a mirror of the Jem'Hadar. She's brave, honorable. She fights for what she believes in. Nobody's forcing her to do these things through the use of a drug.
Right.
She hasn't been programmed to do them. She does them through her sense of duty and her devotion to Bajor.
And she's had to face questions about her religion. And she's changed her mind on things when she's had to. And she now recognizes that the religious leaders are not the paragons that she thought they were.
Yeah, right.
So she's had to adapt, yeah. But also those leaders, I mean, we've talked about many times, they use emotional blackmail on her all the time, and I can't stand it. But at the very least, they're not using a physical drug to control her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. Loved it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. There were some hand-wavy bits, but it's Star Trek. We can forgive it. We can live with that.
Oh, absolutely. And the hand-wavy stuff doesn't even really bother you unless you watch it a couple times. And then you're like, okay, wait a minute. Why didn't they do it this way? But, yeah.
And we're picking on little things.
Of course, yeah.
But it's still a very enjoyable episode. Thumbs up.
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up as well. I accidentally watched this out of order for some reason. It came up first before the previous episode. So I had watched it too soon and I've been kind of sitting on this episode for a while. But yeah, I liked it a lot. It advanced the story. It gave us a little bit more info about the Jem'Hadar. Now we see that the founders don't have as much control as they pretend like they have.
Oh, yeah.
And we also see a little bit of this game that the Vorta and the founders are trying to play with Odo to get him to come back into the fold.
Right.
And I like that. I think that's good. And I like this also advancement, at least in my mind, of this cult-like thing with the founders, that sort of religion that is going on there. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And it's cool to see a show lean so much into these kind of religious fervor type stories. You just don't see that very often. And I find it fascinating.
Agreed.
So definitely liked it. Yes, a couple of goofy holes, but still a thumbs up.
Good to hear. That's awesome.
Okay, that wraps up season 4, episode 22. Come back next week for episode 23. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at ReBingeIT. We're also on Instagram at ReBingeIT. You can also check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback there for individual episodes, and you can listen to the other podcasts for all of the other Star Trek shows. There, of course, is a Star Trek Discovery podcast. There is a Prodigy podcast that James and I do. There is a Picard cast. And there will also be a Strange New Worlds cast when that show comes out. We cover all of the new shows.
And if you're somebody who listens to podcasts through YouTube, we are available on the Talk Through Media channel and also the ReBingeIT channel. Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.